key concept of narrative for the A2 exam preparation in question 1B. As before, when you look through this video, make notes so you can summarise them for yourself during class. And again, there will be question-based tasks, so you should think about your response. A definition of narrative. This is not simply the story or plot. A narrative refers to the telling of a sequence of events in a story, and this will include the elements of plot, character, voice, and point of view. The construction of a narrative refers to the space and time it is set. Often the narrative will be manipulated for cinematic effect, as we'll see further through this video. Construction of the narrative will create meanings for audiences and address those audiences within the text. You may want to think about how the narrative will also refer to the other key concepts of representation and audience through the use of media language. So these are the relevant narrative theories that we're going to look at in this video. You should familiarise yourself with some of them. Most of them you'll already know and will have talked about in your blog. The theory we'll start with is Todorov's narrative stages. You will have looked at this during AS as it's one of the most used theories in understanding media texts, and you may have also looked at it at certain points throughout your English qualifications as well. So Todorov devised a way of analysing narratives according to the way they move forward through different stages, and he said that any narrative follows this predetermined structure. So it starts with the equilibrium. The story or characters are established in their norm. Then there's some sort of disruption. Something will happen that takes the story in a particular direction. The characters will recognise, during the recognition, that they need to do something to reinstate the equilibrium. There's the attempt to repair, which is the most tense moment of the story, as we wonder whether they will succeed in getting back to the equilibrium. And then there's restoration or return to the equilibrium. So questions are answered, problems are solved, etc. And it's not necessarily for the better, as a new state can be created. So although some texts will attempt to manipulate this traditional structure with other narrative devices, if you order the plot in a linear fashion, chances are this will apply. These are some images from Taylor Swift's video for Love Story. She meets a young man at a party, and the lyrics suggest that she's not allowed to be with him, much like in a fairy tale or Romeo and Juliet. You can see how this would meet the boy meets girl storyline. So she meets him, she loses him, she realises while she's standing in her turret that she can't live without him, she looks for him, eventually finds him in a field, and they live ever after. So your first task is just to get you thinking about this narrative structure. And I want you to pick a film that you know well of any genre and write out that 5-point narrative. Find out if it does actually work, and then think about whether or not you've used a traditional narrative structure in your music video. The next theory we're going to look at is Roland Barthes. So we're back to Barthes again. As we know, Barthes said narratives operate as myths, the stories in which we encode truths about ourselves and our society. Barthes' theories are centred around the audience and how they contribute to narrative construction. So as we know, narratives contain signs and symbols for the audience to interpret in their own way, and narrative codes will often build suspense and add to the audience's pleasure of the text. Where we've looked at this in media language, it will help your revision to think about both narrative and media language at the same time when you're thinking of Barthes, so you've doubled up on your revision opportunities. So the first one that Barthes talks about is action codes, which are accumulated gestures, so looks or words that happen between characters and that reinforce our understanding of what is happening in the scene. So this might be the body language or words used that help us know that characters have fallen in love, for example. These are images from Bruno Mars's music video for Just the Way You Are. Here you can clearly see from the body language and looks that they give each other that they're in love and that he's singing about her. And at one point they even use another symbol such as the bell to signify marriage. So Barthes also talks about enigma codes, and an enigma code works to set up little puzzles to be solved throughout the media text so as to delay the story's ending pleasurably. Now, this happens a lot in films, particularly crime and thrillers, but it definitely also happens in music videos. And I want you to think about how could you actually use an enigma code in a music video? example. Next theory, we've got Claude Levi-Strauss and his binary oppositions. One of the easier theories, I think, to remember because there's so many examples you could use. They can provide powerful levels of meaning within a text and can summarise a theme. He highlighted that several oppositions can be present in a media text at once, and westernised thought is framed for us to think in opposites rather than embrace difference or ambiguity. So, just to put simply, a binary opposition could be something like good versus evil, black versus white, rich versus poor, hot versus cold. Two things that are opposite to each other that come together in a text to highlight differences between them. These are some images from Mariah Carey's video for Heartbreaker. The narrative follows Mariah on a night out with her friends at the cinema shortly after she has broken up with her boyfriend. She goes there to confront him and his new girlfriend about the injustice he has caused her. The binary opposition here is good Mariah versus evil Mariah. Good Mariah wears pink to signify innocence, and evil Mariah wears red to show danger. The Mariahs fight it out for their man in the video, and good triumph over evil in the end. The use of this opposition enhances Mariah's star persona as a good person who's been put upon by others, and increases her likability to her fans. It's a bit of a cliche, but it does the job. So your next task is really simple. Just think of some more binary oppositions. This will help you in thinking about whether you've consciously or unconsciously used any in the production of your music video. The next theory we've got is Vladimir Propp. Propp studied Russian folklore and noted that narratives contain the same stock characters or archetypes in nearly every instance. And these are called the 8 spheres of action, or basically character roles. You've got the hero, the villain, the donor, the dispatcher, the false hero, the helper, and then the princess and her father. Now these sound like dated terms, but they do still apply to contemporary examples. This is the music video for Michael Jackson's You Rock My World. Here we can see Michael as the hero, as this is usually a character who seeks something, and in this instance he's rescuing the princess for his own affections. The princess, as we can see top right, is the hero's reward and typically is also the object of the villain's desire. The helper, Chris Tucker, helps the hero in achieving his goal to get the princess, and the villain opposes or actively blocks the hero's request, and in this case it's the club owner who doesn't like Michael taking the girl away and winning the game. So you need to think about how these roles are established in the narrative. In your video, you could maybe find these character roles and talk about how the elements of media language, so camera, etc., help to reiterate what these roles are. This video also contains the binary opposition of, again, good versus evil, and the dance is used to convey this. Propp theory is often used against a traditional narrative structure, as per Todorov's theory, so these two may often go together. Next, we're going to look at narrative structures. Todorov suggested there's a formulaic structure to narratives, however we know it doesn't always work like that. So you can get linear and non-linear narratives. Linear is a clear, logical order for the narrative to follow that moves in one direction. So it will be like the 5-point narrative. A non-linear structure might be unordered or out of sequence, and it doesn't follow the expected order. A single-strand narrative is basically where one story is told at once. There's a single protagonist, and it is often in a linear structure. And a multi-strand narrative is where there are simply multiple stories running at the same time, and often these will interweave with each other. If you think of a film like Love Actually, they have an ensemble cast, and they have several different storylines running at once. So in a multi-strand narrative, this might suggest to the audience that we're given just snippets of what is going on, and the narrative structure itself draws these elements together for the completion of the story. These are some images from Katy Perry's video for Firework, and this is an example of a multi-strand narrative because it tells the story of several different characters at once, with their lives all coming together at the end when they seem to have the same realisation of what it all means to them. So the next task, can you think of another example of a multi-strand narrative in a music video? Now we're going to look briefly at narrative techniques and devices. This is also referred to as subversion techniques, and it's used to do something different or unpredictable with the storyline. The Flashback is one that we'll be very familiar with, and it's recognisable through the use of editing. You perhaps get black and white in contrast to the film's colour, and there might be an establishing shot of what the character is doing first, initiated by a transition effect into what we're going back to. Now, the flashback takes the narrative back in time from the current point, so we can see what has happened to take the character to that point, and it gives us a new perspective on what is happening. It's important to remember that while a flashback sends the story back, it often drives the film's narrative forward because we're given more information about what's happening. And a flash forward can do the same thing. It can reveal an atrocity that we're left wondering how they'll get to that point. And in a music video, it can highlight the emotion behind a song's lyrics, cutting between two kinds of action. This is an example of Calvin Harris's music video for the appropriately named Flashback. He keeps having flashbacks to the night before, and as the audience, we're trying to figure out what happened and how he's come to be on a boat by himself. We've also got several enigma codes going on, like arrows stuck to the side of the boat, and all sorts of props that have been used in the night before. So we're wondering how he got there and what happened and what made his night so fantastic. These are some other narrative techniques for you to check out in your own time. They could be twists. Check out Carly Rae Jepsen's Call Me Maybe for a particularly good example. Cliffhangers, or an altered point of view. And if you can think of any more that apply to your music video, then do use them. So, just to go back to Goodwin, there's two things we could talk about here with the narrative. Number two, that there's a relationship between the lyrics and the visuals. And number three, there's a relationship between music and the visuals. And you should realise by now how the narrative can use those lyrics and visuals to tie in the story of what is going on and what we see. So finally, just summarise your notes to use in the lesson and find out how you can answer the question in the most effective way.